Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Friday, September 20th, 2024, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. And today is our what we call our what did we just talk about? Because this is our chance every 2 weeks to kind of pause and look back at the last what would be the last 2 weeks worth, but 9 shows that we did, and sort of recirculate back to them. And man, I got to tell you, on today's show, I have plenty to circle back to, not recirculate, circle back to and do. But before we do that, Beth, I know you created this one. Can we just bring this back up? I got to say, was this Midjourney?
This is Midjourney. Yeah.
I mean, we're all used to seeing Midjourney do really well with images. It's still the leader in my opinion. But wow, the slight wrinkles and the texture to the face, I feel like, is really, really well done on this one. So like, oh man, it continues to impress.
Thanks.
And I'm on the wrong screen and we're going backwards. And that's because I'm trying to turn it off and it's an overlay. It's not a screen. Okay. Here we are. It's Friday. I've got my Hawaiian shirt on. Jimmy's got his. Beth, not so much today. That's okay. I usually forget. So today was a rarity where I actually remembered to do it. Okay, so I have quite a few things to go to, a couple different topics. But before we do that, let me add this to the stage, because let's just remind our viewers what we have actually talked about in the last 2 weeks. So if we go all the way down here to this down here where we're seeing the preview of Carl talking, that was 2 weeks ago, essentially. That's a Monday. So on that Monday, we were talking about the future of jobs. We had some really cool quotes that they came off from Sinead Bovell. I can't remember how to say her last name, but anyway, she's a futurist. I love what she puts out. She just put out a whole bunch more stuff this week. So we could definitely dive into that topic. Obviously, I have some updates on Apple because things just actually happened today. We had some news shows. Google Labs and Notebook LM is having a moment, I think is the way you would say this. Like, holy cow. And that's something we sort of were live doing on a show. So, I mean, I don't want to pat our own backs, but we were definitely ahead of everybody else on it, because I put it in last Sunday's newsletter, had the LM's audio podcast thing. We'll talk about that. That was already in the newsletter. And this week, it's just been like the Neuron and Rundown, and all of them are just like, cannot stop talking about it. That's old news. That was a week ago. We talked about that. So we'll talk about that. I have some updates on Replit. We talked about thinking out loud and what is like brainstorming look when we now have new tools like O1. And then, of course, the next day we talked and we did more of a deep dive about O1 preview. I have some updates there as well. News. And then yesterday, finally, we talked about a really fun show, talking about music and what the producer Timberland is doing, but also what other artists are doing. So there you go. I mean, like, this is a typical 2 weeks for us, right, guys? Like, we just have just a ton of different topics. This is why I love doing this show, is that it's not about being a specialist in any one particular area of AI. It's about just leveling up, increasing, rising tide rises all boats, that whole thing, right? In AI. So hopefully, if you're listening to the show, you're getting a little bit of everything. And what I hope is that when you're listening to the show, it allows you to sort of formulate your own ideas. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that thing with Timberland. Well, I'm not a music producer, but that is really interesting. And then how would I apply that to what I'm doing now that I know that that's possible and what they're doing? So anyway, that's a long intro for me. Obviously, like I said, I have a lot that I want to dive into, but I will defer. I think I went to Jimmy yesterday first, Beth. So I'm going to go to you. Beth, what's the first topic that you want to recirculate to?
So
circle back to.
I want to go back to the conversation about O1 preview and O1 mini.
Okay.
And the reason is that I said, so there are quotes of me saying, if that you should take as long as you to create the prompt, and the prompt should be incredibly detailed if you want it to think a lot and give you a very reasoned response. That's for O1 preview, and that turns out to only be true sometimes, right? The O1 preview can sometimes give you a much better response if you don't give it a ton of stuff. If, like, you have just asked one fairly simple prompt, like 1 line, 2 lines, that imply a lot of reasoning and thinking through things, but not actually telling it exactly how you want it to think through, because that's actually what it's trained to do. So I've been feeling that since since that show. So I wanted to say what I said before. Don't listen to that. Listen to yourself. The other thing that I think is coming through is that O1 Mini seems to be a fully trained model, and does better in a bunch of circumstances than O1 Preview. O1 Preview is a little more like they gave us something to play with so that they can help, so that we can help them figure out what it can do and the problems that it's having. And so O1 Mini is sometimes the better option. And they upgraded, I don't remember I don't remember it, like I think it was still limited, more limited when we did the show, and so now you can get 50 queries of O1 Mini a day and 50 versus 30 queries of O1 Preview a week.
Because it costs a lot more to run, right? Yeah,
Right.
it's definitely more costly to it.
So
I agree, but really, I want to push back a little bit on that, Beth. I don't really think you were wrong. I mean, I'm not saying you saying you're wrong, but like, I didn't interpret it that way, because you should still take your time with a good prompt. Although I agree with you, you do not have to do all of the chain of thought. You don't have to write all that out, because that is in fact what you're asking of the model. And that's probably more just a little bit of a retraining for people on how to use prompting for this specific model, because it is different. But like, generally speaking, I just want to say it's not really a pushback. It's that I actually agree with your original statement, which is that yes, you should, you get 50 a week, at least of the O1 Preview side. You should definitely pump the brakes, slow down, and think, what is it that I actually want to know? And what are the parts and pieces to this? Don't try to do the reasoning for it. That's what the tool is for. But give it enough context that it can go and do a really good result for you, hopefully on the first shot, so that you're not just blowing through 50 credits. Because like that, you could do that easily in 3 hours or 2 hours or something like that. It'd be like, oh, I didn't really get anywhere because I wasn't really organized when I started this. I think I cut you off, Carl. Did you have something to add to that?
Jimmy, actually.
Oh, Jimmy, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, real quick. I just wanted to see if Beth, with this new outlook, do you have a couple of examples that you would apply to Preview and to Mini?
I don't. So I have not spent very much time with Preview, because I have one of those like, oh God, I can only use it 50 times in a week, and that somehow doesn't work with my head. So like, I'm doing a lot of like, is this worth one of the 50? But what I will say is that for Mini, I use it in those circumstances where I would use example prompts, few shot prompting, right? It's that same kind of context, but I'm adding various pieces of code or that kind of thing, so that I can get a more reasoned response. And the reason I'm doing that is because I do code more than I do math, and there's a third thing that it's really good for, maybe science experiments. Like, of those three, I do code more often than the other two. So like, those are the kinds of things which aren't really helpful to play with. But the other thing that I will say is that when it's thinking, and it's done thinking, it starts to give you the response, you can click the down arrow on that and expand what the thinking process was, and that is super helpful.
It is.
Right? So
yeah, I like that more, actually.
Right. So
I
it's like
the thinking.
What's the quote? When people tell you who they are, believe them. When AI tells you who it is, totally go and read that, so that you know how to engage with AI.
It makes you better at prompting. It
Totally.
does. Because if it's going through its reasoning steps, you're like, oh, when I am going back to 4.0 and doing like chain of thought and structuring my prompts, well, I know the model is working in this direction, so maybe I should mirror more of that in order to get better responses. Like, maybe I should lean towards the model's best practices, if that's in fact what we're seeing. But I definitely read them all the time, because I'm like, oh, that's a different way of saying that. Yeah, that's right. I could ask it. Like, for instance, it didn't come out of O1 Preview, but an example would be the term subtask. It doesn't sound like anything here, right? Like, subtask, big what, Brian? It turns out, though, for a problem that I was having inside a custom GPT, using the term subtask triggered ChatGPT to do the thing I needed it to do. It was doing a miserable job previously to it, and I could not figure it out. In fact, I got on a call with somebody, I think, who was 3 a.m. their time. It was somebody out of the AI exchange. I literally posted an AI exchange, was like, if you consider yourself good at custom GPT prompting, I need to talk to you. And he literally was like, I'll talk to you right now, Brian. I'm like, but it's like 3 a.m. He's like, it's not a big deal. I talked to, it's like, I always deal with people on the East Coast. It's normal for me to work through the night. And we talked for 30 minutes, and little words like that come up. So whether I get them from an O1 preview thinking where I trill down and get that, or you get it from earlier, these little nuggets end up being super, super valuable. So a little off topic there, but like, I agree with you, Beth, is really what I'm trying to say.
And I just wanted to add on to it. I had this same exact moment, Brian, when I learned about the term meta statement. So like if I don't want the fluffy bit before and after where it says, and if you use this in the right way, it'll be, beyond the conclusion, but the little statements that ChatGPT adds to whatever output, they call it meta statements. And then now when I'm outputting, let's say, our show summary, I can just say no formatting, no meta statements, and then it disappears. Yeah, I should just add it to my to my own personal
memory
rule set. My condition set. So
if it would look at the memory, that's a whole other topic. If we would actually look at the memory. Hey, I do want to bring Car, you had maybe a comment on this too, but I want to bring this up really quick while we're talking about O1 preview. And I know this doesn't probably look like much on your screen, but Sam Altman was just at a T-Mobile event, and so he had a couple things to say about it that I think are valuable. First of all, he emphasized the significance of the advancement. Over time, this will look as significant as the GPT series. Think of this, meaning O1 preview, as being at the GPT-2 stage of these new reasoning models. You will see over coming years, it will get to the GPT-4 level models. And I don't even think that's coming years, to be honest with you. And then this isn't a quote, but it's still the very early days. It's roughly equivalent in terms of the performance compared to what we come. Oh, they're just redoing it. And then he said here, we had another one. Despite being early, he expressed confidence in the rapid progress. Quote, but even in coming months, you will see upgrades as we move from O1 preview to O1. The improvement curve is very steep, and things models can't solve today, we'll be able to solve in a few months. We're going to see a whole new set of ways to use these models. We're that early with O1. But there will be new ways to use it, and it will take us and users a while to work out how to use it. So I just thought that was really, really interesting. I always love getting, like, this happens pretty commonly, right? We get the releases, and then there's usually 2 or 3, like, it seems like in-person Sam Altman fireside chats or something that either coincidentally or not so coincidentally happen, where you get these like extra nuggets, you get these extra things that are being said about it that wasn't necessarily part of a release or whatever. Anyway, I just thought this was really interesting when it comes to O1 preview is, he's referring to it as GPT-2. Think about where we were at 3.5. Now go backwards to 2, which wasn't even generally, you had to be a developer, you had to request access. It wasn't publicly available at that time. So I couldn't even tell you what its abilities were, but it was very, very basic compared to what we have today. And if that's the level of reasoning we have today, then yeah, that's a very easy thing to say in 6 months, 1 year, what these reasonings can do. And then obviously that leads to level 3, which is actually agentic workflows. So we are definitely moving in that direction.
GPT-2 was a completion model, if I'm remembering correctly. So it wasn't even really a conversation. You could start something and get GPT-2 to complete it. If we're like way back at that level with these O1 models,
you could still do that. I think, I wonder if that's been turned off in the playground. I haven't looked at that, but the completion part of it was something you could absolutely do in the playground for a long time. I don't know if that's there though.
And most of the models, not just OpenAI models, have been trained in that way as well. So completion doesn't go away. It just means that ChatGPT had this added conversational interface layer. And what is that? What is the analogous? I use analogous as improvisers do. So what is if that's like the map of what the leap is. What is the analogous advance from O1 now as the equivalent of the completion model to a chat interface, right? I mean, it is what blew it all up. Carl, I think I interrupted you. Do you have O1 thoughts?
Or I think the only thing that I've been I did a couple of 4 or 5 discovery presentations since it launched, and it's none of those prospects actually knew it was launched or know anything about it. That's part one. I think one maybe thought they did. And then 2, they're from a use case perspective on that specific thing. When I quickly explained what it is, there was no use case that came to mind on what they thought it was. So it was more of an interesting observation on where businesses are on what they think it is. So I think at the end of them, they were quoting what I was saying. It's like, hey, there's a PhD in your pocket now, and they'll go home and try it and whatnot. And we talked about other stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. This one, the story about this hasn't gone outside of our AI bubble. It hasn't really peaked anywhere. So, which is more of an interesting observation on where people or where mainstream views any of this at the moment, or any type of advancement, because maybe things are moving so fast that they stop covering a lot of this stuff unless it's something super, super big. Although we think this is big, but it's for everybody else, it's not.
Truthfully, who knew about GPT-2 when it was out? Not me. I didn't. I wasn't, actively following that. I wasn't really following any of it. So, I think it was DALL-E first and then GPT. I guess 3 or 3.5 came out in like October, November of 2022. That's when I woke up to a lot of this stuff. I mean, then I did the research and I looked back and I was like, oh, this stuff's been around for a long time. And of course, there's people on the internet are like, you fools, we've been using it. Your Reddit people, they're like, we've been using this forever. You guys are you all been asleep, blah, blah, blah. So I wonder if that's more of it, Carl. It's like when we show use cases, because it's a bit limited unless you're in the coding, unless you're in the scientific, unless you're doing literal math like type use cases where it's immediately applicable. I wonder if it's just because right now it's kind of at a GPT-2 level, and so it hasn't hit the mainstream because it hasn't hit that 3.5 where there's that tipping point where people go, oh my God, and then it'll be everywhere in the news, and then we'll be saying, yeah, remember we were talking about that in September of 2024. So I think that's part of it, obviously.
I think you'd have to do something else that not just when you say reason at the level of a PhD or higher level reasoning, that's very tough for people to think about. It'd be like, okay, great. Tell me what it can do for me today, right now.
Yeah.
And be like, well, if you think about your business and then do this, and okay, it's kind of nebulous on that. Tell me what it can do. I tell them what it can do, and it's like, hey, I gotta try it actually out. But it's again very personalized to that person, that team, that business to what they want to do. So yeah, it's just it's very interesting on what that is.
I want to pivot real quick only because we're into the show a bit and we have a whole lot of other topics we discussed. So we'll sort of pause on O1 preview at the moment. Just an update because we did a whole show about what came out of the Glow Time event from Apple. So kind of surprisingly, now I did order the I did order the iPhone 16, the basic. In fact, it'll be showing up at my house in the next 2 hours or so. What I didn't expect, because they had said not to expect it, was that there would be really any Apple Intelligence available. But that's not, in fact, true as long as you're willing to play around with the beta model. 18.1 beta came out today, just in time for the launch of the phones. Because like today is the first day that the phones can arrive. Either you're going to get them at the store or they're going to arrive at your doorstep, right? So I think that's really interesting. Obviously, I can't really report on any of it because I don't have the phone and I don't have it updated. I think, Beth, you have like the Pro and stuff like that. So this is something you could potentially play with. But regardless, we'll talk about it next week, maybe on the news show or something like that as it comes up. But it's not the full boat. So like, what can you get with the 18.1? Let's just look at this really quick article from pocketlint.com. Great name. I didn't even look at that earlier until I just thought it was like a TechCrunch or something. It's a slightly better Siri. It looks different when you pop it up. You can get AI writing tools within your messaging if you want to rewrite it. I watched, I think, Marquez Brownlee talk about this, and I was like, yeah, this is probably not something I do on my phone. But hey, if you send a lot of messages on your phone, you can get some rewrite abilities like you would in Gmail and stuff like that. Quicker responses. So it's hard to see, but in this picture, they're showing like, just like LinkedIn, when you do a DM on LinkedIn and it's like, here are 3 already formulated responses, like, great, sounds good, let's do it, or something like that. And I use those on LinkedIn from time to time because they're faster. I actually think I will use this. It's a simple thing. It's not like the latest and greatest AI, but I'll use it. This one's cool. Call recording. Yes, it does let both people on the call know that you're recording. But then it will send the entire transcript directly to your notes. That is super cool. I didn't even realize that was going to be an option. Cleaning up photos, although they said that's kind of hit and miss. Summarizing collections of notifications. I don't know. That one I'm not really that thrilled at. So you're going to get, we don't have to spend too much time on that, but if you're getting a 16, if you have a 15 Pro, then you can try out 18.1 and try some of the new Apple Intelligence features and functions, but not all of them, including the Siri. For instance, you saw nothing in that article about it going out to ChatGPT, right? That still isn't part of it or whatever. So I'll be interested to play with it. I've been waiting a while now to see if this is something that can bring me back. Actually, I never really used Siri, so to bring me to Siri. So interesting, and all kind of happening today. So hopefully I will have more updates on that over the weekend. Anybody else going to download 18.1?
I did last night for my iPad. So we'll see if it after the weekend, after I've tested it, I can report back.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. Okay, so there's other topics. Obviously, I have some stuff on Reddit. Replit rather. Do you guys have anything on the Replit topic? Beth? Yeah, go ahead, Beth, and I'll bring in what I'll queue mine up after you.
So Replit also expanded the amount of queries and that kind of stuff that it can do. So you're no longer worried about unless you're coding all day, right? Like with Replit, unless you're really like a hardcore user, you're unlikely to hit the limits in my experience. The other piece of that is that they added a one-click SSH, which basically translates to, if you like Cursor and you don't want to use the agent, but you want to learn more about actual coding in Cursor and doing something like that, Cursor VS Code, they've created a one-click to connect those two. And so now you can deploy automatically or deploy directly out of that to Replit. And that stands out to me because I was in some kind of crazy loophole trying to connect, and I'm now that it's one click on Reddit's side, Replit's side, I think I'll be able to do it. So those are two pieces. The difference between that is that the agent isn't really teaching you to code, although you can ask questions about what it is. Like, you can learn to code through the agent, but the cursor is actually much more of a, you're watching it, you're asking questions about it, you're talking about the error message that you got, and then kind of learning to code through that interface. So it really just depends on how you want to engage with this, but I found both of those updates really exciting.
Yeah, the only thing I had was just something from Riley Brown and I got to pull this back up here so I can get to it, that he was talking about on X. If you don't know Riley Brown, definitely somebody I encourage you to follow on TikTok or X or otherwise. He always puts out really, really interesting content. What I like about Riley is that he's a boots on the ground person. He just doesn't, he's not one of these. He's like, he goes through and builds the process. In this case, this is probably a 1 hour, 54-minute live stream where he's like just walking through the process. And there's just always a ton to learn from it. But I just want to talk about what he said in his X post here. I wanted to convince my team that we should build an app. And rather than describing it and doing wireframing, etc., I decided it would just be faster to build a full prototype with Cursor and Replit and send them the deployed link. And so more to the point, and we can actually talk. Well, you guys let me know if the volume is going to be any good on this. Let's see.
Super clean. This is all working. Let's go ahead and test this.
Okay.
I have an idea for an app that will allow me to talk to my code base. So I want to connect it with GitHub. I want to be able to ideate with an AI chatbot that's super good at coding and has good ideas and understands the type of app that I'm creating and the overall fact that I'm using AI to create the app and stuff. And so we can end that pretty damn fast. And now we can hit this plus button right here. And we now have access to all of those templates. I've just deleted all of them except for one, so we can click on this. And it should, in theory, I need to add a loading screen here, which is why it doesn't look like it's doing anything. But here it is. And look at this. It says one full paragraph plan, the user experience in concise bullets. Look at that. And then a simple text hierarchy of.
Okay, so we'll just pause it there because it's really just more about the idea. But you can go on X and watch that. Now he's showing the end result, and then the rest of it is him actually building that live and probably working through roadblocks. What I really, really love, though, is, his comment here. And rather than describing it and doing the wireframe, etc., I decided it would be faster just to build the full prototype. Now, look, you've got to have at least Riley's skills to be able to do this. But chances are, somebody, you can find somebody who does have the skills. And even if you were going to go onto Fiverr or something like that, and somebody is really, really good at like Replit or Cursor, that means you're going to be spending considerably less to that person on Fiverr to build you something that could be a rapidly deployed prototype. So it's not like we're saying, I don't know still that I would go in and necessarily learn how to use these tools. The fact that other people can do it and can do it faster means I'm spending less to get that done. So what is it to a SME business to spend $500 to $1,000 for a viewable, usable prototype of an idea? What is that to a business? That's like, you might as well be 50 cents. It's not a big deal. And what would it have cost otherwise to do it? So I just think this is like a really, really great use case of exactly how I expect businesses to be using the Replits and the Cursors. And I'm trying to find it. I was just looking a second ago in one of the newsletters I read this morning before I got out of bed, and I cannot remember where I found, but I'll find it. There is a open source competitor to Replit that you download on your computer, and it's open source and it's free. And I guess it'll always be free. And I've forgotten the name. If anybody else can find it, I'll try to find it as well. But anyway, so I thought that was super cool. And I would imagine if you go on the Fiverr right now, you could probably type in Cursor or Replit and get all sorts of results of people saying, I build out prototypes, I build out whatever it is, workable models, whatever they're going to say, workable apps. Pretty cool. Really, really.
Just one thing it was interesting is that when you said about Riley's skills, because that guy actually just started coding, I would say a couple months back. Like literally, he had no coding experience, as in he actually wasn't a software engineer or anything like that. And then because you have all these tools, you can get ramped up pretty quickly. Now, granted, you will not have the capabilities as somebody who has, 5, 6, 7 years, went to school, React, all those things, but you can move up pretty fast with like a Replit. Now, mind you, some of those things it would be just like anything in AI. If you were the expert, you can start looking at what are some of the things that it is not doing, or asking the right questions to, for example, it's like, let's say you know no knowledge, use Replit or Cursor, and you build something out. A more advanced programmer would be like, oh, it did this incorrect, but if I do it this way, and it actually has a little bit of coding language, you can actually make your thing more. You can make whatever app development even better. What's fascinating is within 6 months, would it have the reasoning capability to understand that concept and go even deeper than the knowledge that you would have like versus an actual software engineer. That's where it'd be fascinating, the advancement of when we talked about reasoning with O1 and so on.
I think you just hit a light bulb for me, Carl, with that, which is, look, one of the hardest things in business right now is that your coders, you know, the old adage that they're in a dark room and they're coding away. Like that's a stereotype, right? But like the idea that they are doing what they're an expert as, but you know what they're typically not an expert as at the business model, how the business runs. It's not what they do. It's not their expertise. If you can add in a bit of reasoning to the coding side, what that probably, and like a RAG type solution, what that's going to enable businesses to do is say, hey, at the outset of building this prototype, building this app, build whatever, it already has the understanding of the business and what's most important for like the user experience or whatever, which is drastically different than presenting an idea to somebody who can code on your team and saying, could you build this? And they go, yeah, I could build that for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's a transfer of knowledge between those two parties. There's an expert here and there's an expert here. And one of the hardest things to do in business is have that communication across the way. That's why we always say, like with AI, one of the people who are going to be the most successful in the future are probably people who have really good communication skills, because they're able to think about what you're saying and translate it to another tool, another person or whatever. So I don't know, man, you just gave me like a really big like light bulb on that. You're like, absolutely right. If you can add in reasoning and background information before the first line of code is written, that is definitely going to be a bonus and save companies a lot of money down the road, so that they don't get to a fully workable prototype that doesn't solve maybe the actual end user's pain point.
Mm-hmm. Brian, and you just highlighted what makes what AI is going to do for a really good project manager or program manager is if they can bring that on, because they're already the linchpin between the two columns there. And their job is usually to do that translation. So if they're empowered by AI, that means they're just going to be a superstar.
And before we move on, I did find it. Carl gave me just enough time to find it in the deep dives of the newsletters. It's called Pearl AI. That's the open source one. Here's the TLDRs on it from this article, Geeky Gadgets, which is clearly written. And my apologies to them if it's not, but was clearly written by AI, because it just keeps repeating itself over and over again. The whole thing, I think it was written by AI. Pearl AI is an open source, locally installed IDE AI editor. I don't know what that means. You guys can tell me. Alternative to Cursor, it addresses ethical concerns by remaining free and open source, benefiting the community. Key features include being open source and free. Yeah, see, like the same thing. Getting started involves downloading the software, creating an account. It respects open source principles, blah, blah, blah. Experience similar to Cursor AI. Okay, this isn't really, like I said, it's a horrible article. It's a horrible AI generated article, but it was what I got. I think it's more of a puff piece for Pearl AI. So if you want to go check that out, you can dig into learning more about Pearl AI, which is an open source alternative to, I guess, Cursor. And I don't know much more about it than that, but it is very cool that you can download it and use it locally on your machine.
Request for the Riley video. Will you drop that link in the chat?
Yeah, I got it right here. I'll do it right now.
Thanks.
Yep. There's that. And you know what I'm also going to share really quick is, because I mentioned her at the top, Sinead Bovell. Here's her. I'm putting it in the comments as well on YouTube. Direct to her LinkedIn profile. Highly recommend going to follow her and go look at some of the stuff she just put out in the last week. She usually is sharing like clips from an interview or a discussion she had. And I don't know. I always walk away feeling like I learned something or I got more. I think what she does is she really enables me to have more clarity around a topic. So she's just very well spoken, obviously highly educated. One of my favorite people right now to listen to.
There's one thing I wanted to
go for it.
To jump on is so at Inbound this week is Microsoft HubSpot Breeze, which is their suite of AI tools. And then really I want to point out that just like Agentforce, they came out with their, well, I guess it all ties into Microsoft Copilot, because they have what's called Breeze Copilot. Then they have Breeze Agents. and Breeze Intelligence. So I was like, did they pull the Apple, pull the Microsoft, and then just like, you know what, we'll have it all under the Breeze banner. So they're doing, so HubSpot has their whole intelligence suite. I think Salesforce, Mark Benioff, I found that clip where he's like, we are hard pivoting towards agents. So they have their suite, and then obviously Microsoft, which is to me a fascinating, well, just to go into HubSpot a bit, I think obviously it all has to do with their tools, whether it's writing, buying intent, and then also building out your agent, however you want to build that agent. I just by using Copilot Studio with Microsoft and having Einstein, using a bit of Einstein when I had access to Salesforce with my former company, I'm kind of a little bit skeptical on how in depth you can actually go, because it's only tied and you're on their product roadmap. You're not on kind of your roadmap. So, and what the level of, and maybe this is just coming from someone who's worked in the space, not, the targeted everyday user. What I'm curious about with the Salesforce agent, Breeze agent, Microsoft Copilot is, one, who in the company will be able to build all these things out? Because it's like, oh, you can do all this. It's like, well, you need somebody who can actually build these things out. And I find the simpler it is to build, the less useful it starts becoming, because you have to tie in a whole bunch of elements and data. And then the other thing is, when you say agents, what does agents actually mean? Because I still think agents have to be autonomous and be able to do tasks, repeat tasks, stop, create new tasks. When we talk about agents, is this more of a glorified automation that it's doing?
Yes.
Is it actually? I don't know. And
that's my answer to most all agent things right now. Glorified automation.
Is it a glorified? Can it only do this one thing? Because when I think of agents, it's like it actually can create things, delete things, and repeat things on its own. But I think I was listening to the Cognitive Revolution podcast, and the lead engineer for Agent.ai, which is kind of Dharmesh Shah, who's co-founder of HubSpot, his little thing. He was talking about it should only do, I think their ethos is it should only do specific tasks, and then they'll build in all the repeat functionality. So I think their belief is they're going to set a foundation and then maybe build on top of it. But I'm kind of, again, it's a little skeptical, because if we all have our own agents that can do all these things for us, let's say one that OpenAI builds, what am I going to use their agents for? Because if my agent can access HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft, and I ask it to do specific things, wouldn't that be better than just a HubSpot agent that can do one specific task, that I have to build out multiple of these things? So just a thought that I had.
It's orders of hierarchy is what I explain. I would think about it as, you would have a global agent that's Carl's agent that does reach out and connects with the specific agent in HubSpot, who would then pick up the task to do X. But you would have a global agent that's sitting over the top of it, that's basically saying, here's my chain of thought, and step 3 is talk to HubSpot agent, which should go do X, Y, and Z, and it will bring that information back. Then I move to step 4, which may have nothing to do with the HubSpot agent. That's the way I would think it would work, but I could be wrong.
Well,
I'm curious.
that sounds like I'll just do a quick little pushback. Sorry, Carl. Is that it's sure that makes sense, is to use whatever they've already created to access their own systems. But when we get agents and we can see that any coding project can be done already, then our agent can build the specific agent that's needed for our use case. right? So we don't need them to create an agent because our agent will create it. Is that along the lines of your thinking there, Carl?
So okay, it's fascinating. I love your thinking, Brian, because I didn't go that route. But I was thinking, okay, let's say you have Salesforce right now, right? The clunky version of Salesforce, and you're like, I have an agent. It's like, I need this report done. I need you to pull this thing. I need you to add this, check this, analyze, do this. Okay, so my personal agent, let's call it the OpenAI agent, goes in and does it. Now, Salesforce agent has a specific agent to do one specific task, right? I need an agent that builds a report and analyzes it and gets back to you. My question is, well, if I have an agent that can do that, why do I need your agent? But it's fascinating because you're right, Brian. Maybe they're thinking, well, OpenAI and companies will have an agent. So if we build it, then instead of my agent doing it itself, it'll connect to that agent, do it for it. But I'm like, doesn't matter. Whatever I would say as an agent, I'd be like, whichever is faster for you to do,
exactly.
do it now. I don't care. Just do whatever you want to do, right? Or I'd be like, you know what? Bypass this. I want you to build a Salesforce for me to do this, and ignore Salesforce because I don't like the UI or something stupid like that.
Well, but I think that's a larger question, right? It's what is the overall service that you're connecting to Salesforce or HubSpot or anything like that. Yeah. If your agent can literally build all the components for you to access that information, to build out these, whatever BI you need or whatever, then you don't need their service. You have something that will build that thing for you at the time that you need it.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that we're talking like engineers and coding people. And one of the things that Salesforce does is restrict your ability to engage with the data based on the level of permission that you have. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that you will want to use Salesforce agents within that, because that's going to be built on top of that permission layer that already exists. I also think that there are cases where companies will just choose to do their own CRM instead of Salesforce. But in the context of this question, that's one of the reasons that you would do that. If you have a large organization, you've already set up the permission structure, and now you are going to have an external agent that's going to come and talk to the Salesforce agent. You're going to need to understand what it has access to, and it's going to ask you or already know what your permissions are.
I had this exact conversation with somebody else. I think it was Gwen, and she asked me the exact same thing. And I said, okay, but what if because my agent is my representative. Outside of power of attorney, I would give my agent pretty much like, here is all my passwords. Here's all my authentications. You are actually acting as if you're me. Outside of me and my monkey fingers, I want you to do everything. Log in as me, password as me, authenticate as me. You know what? As an agent, you're actually pretending to be me. So you go in, log in. Now, obviously, it's always based on my permissions, but wouldn't it be interesting? Because I know this is going to happen. I'm going to go to, say, Steve. Steve has a much higher Steve or Joanne. Joanne might have this type of permission. Steve might have this permission. And I'm like, hey, Joanne, some really smart person. I need my agent to do this. And they're like, what's an agent? It's like, I need you to just give me permission to do this. And Steve, I need you to give my agent permission to do this. Sounds good. Because no one knows what you're talking about. And you got to do this really early. Because I've done this before too. It's like, and then allow that agent. But I mean, also, if you have like a director level, VP level, and most VPs won't even know what the heck you're talking about. Right. It's like, hey, I need Taylor's VP level access into Salesforce, and then give that OAuth permission or SSO permission to that person, then log in as them, and my agent replicates myself and go whatever I need to do. So I guess where I'm going as Salesforce, HubSpot, Copilot, all these places would now have to have a different IT, and this is for Junmi, what kind of level of new security would you need to implement when you have this agent that can do this kind of stuff? And maybe I'm taking it down a different rabbit hole.
No. It's real simple. Force your people to listen to your IT department and do what they say. Those kinds of permissions and rules and process and procedure already exist. The problem, Carl, is certain individuals like to find their ways around the rules and use social engineering to accomplish their goals. But IT departments probably hate you, Carl. I'm guessing that right now. But
no, actually, the last two companies they don't hate me. They say, "Okay, look, we know that you know how to do this. We know, and you know, we trust you. Here's things. Don't mess around with this. Just please don't do it." And like, okay, no problem.
So, well, I mean, that means they've decided to vet you because it would be easier to do that instead. But in general, that's what access permissions are set up for, is so that things are firewalled in such a way that you don't give out those permissions. That's just the same thing. The key thing there was like, oh, I need you to give me your credentials to access X, Y, and Z. That's the problem right there, is that they'll give you the credentials. You're never supposed to give out your credentials. You go talk to your IT department, say, hey, I need temporary access for this, or I need access to these things for me for this length of time. And then they create specialized credentials, activate it for a certain amount of time. You go access it, and then it turns it off. But
I would rather have not that conversation. I'd rather have the conversation, what do you need it for? And the person's like, and then I speak too complex, and they're like, so but I'm like, but at the end, you'll get this. Oh, yeah, no problems. Here's my pass. Perfect. That's all I need. See you later. That is an easier conversation for me to have than actually go to IT and ask her the long list of questions. Because I know I can talk my way around this person. The IT will probably know what I'm trying to do. So social engineering, I kind of know my way.
That's the key, everyone. Social engineer your way through permissions. No.
We will be doing a Salesforce show probably in the next 2 weeks where we will address some of this because Salesforce just came out with massive amounts of free training and wanting to get everybody up to speed. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Hopefully the people using Salesforce have taken some of the free training and know that you should not say yes when the person comes and says all this gobbledygook, because you can say, you know what, go ahead and send that to me in text and then put that in your AI. Ask ChatGPT or Perplexity to explain to you what it just said, and is there a red flag? You should be doing this with the terms of services as well, right? Like, and your AI will say, oh yeah, no, Carl, you should not say yes to Carl. Carl is asking for something.
But when you go into these conversations, nothing to do with AI, you understand what that pain point that person is looking at. It's like, hey, I need more revenue. I need more pipeline. All I go in, this is literally, and Brian, you know this, hey, I need more pipeline. You need more pipeline. I can get you more pipeline. This is how I'll do it. You don't care about the how I do it. This is how I'll do it. Oh, okay. I just need your password though. And okay, no problems. That's how those conversations always run, and that's how I get in trouble a lot of the time.
I've had more than a few CEOs be very, very open with passwords and stuff like that to me, and I'd be like, exactly. I don't know if you should do that. I mean, I don't know if that's a good idea. Okay, we do have to pause on this. And like Beth said, we're going to have a show about Salesforce and all their AI. But I'm glad you did bring it up, Beth, because I happened to see that in one of my newsletters this morning as well, talking about how Salesforce made all of their AI training free till 2025. So you should, what is that called? Trailhead. So you should definitely go jump on that and go check out what Salesforce has to offer, because I mean, hello, free training. And I mean, it may be basic stuff, but also may be really, really helpful. So everybody should go check that out. The only other thing we didn't really get to, and I don't have time other than to pull it up on the screen, was Notebook LM, which is okay because we did talk about it. You can go back to our Google Labs episode, Notebook LM was one of probably 15 topics because there's so much stuff in Notebook Google Labs. But what everybody was losing their mind over in this last week, but like I said, we'd already had it in our newsletter, was this.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to
create a
today's
podcast
deep
type sound
dive.
to it, where
And-
you have two people, a man and a woman, having a conversation about your data. What we didn't really get to, there we go. Behind it is, well, here, we'll just show it. See here, you have FAQ, study guide, table of contents, timeline, briefing doc. So you, beyond the audio, you can also create all these other things. So for this show that was about the future of jobs from 2 weeks ago, you can find here study guide. So we could have actually created a study guide for that show. And it's like, it's funny, right? Because it doesn't really work in this case. But what did Brian say about children? What do they believe in asking children what they want to be when they grow up? Is probably an outdated question. So if you want to test your knowledge of the Daily AI Show, you could technically go in and create study guides and stuff like that. Timeline of events is kind of funny too, because it's us talking. So it's just kind of funny how it does that. Anyway, didn't really have time to get into it, but like I said, Google's Notebook LM, which has been out for months upon months upon months. But if you read news stories, they're like, Google's latest release blows everybody away. I'm like, well, the audio is new, but Google LM we've been talking about for months. So go play with that. It's free. notebooklm.google.com to go check that out. Okay. We're at time. Was there any last 30-second things that we missed from the last 2 weeks? Because that's a ton. As always, our folks in the comment section are having their own party. It's a Friday. There's been a lot going on in the comments, so thank you everybody for adding in there. Lots of jokes about agents needing to do Carl's recycling. There was comments about Jimmy being as passionate about IT as Carl is about recycling. I love that. I love seeing those in there. So keep the comments going. Come join the party. If you're listening to this on record or replay, but you're around at 10 a.m. Eastern on Monday through Friday, come hang out with us in YouTube, because we have a really fun group in there, and they would love to have more people to make fun of us with, I guess, in there, which is awesome. Hey, next week we have a whole bunch of new shows coming up. Don't forget, we have the newsletter that's going to go out on Sunday morning. It's free. You can sign up for it this weekend, and you will get Sunday's edition. That newsletter group is growing week by week, so it's really cool to see that. Really happy where it's going to. You can go to thedailyAIshow.com in order to sign up for the newsletter, and you will get it in your inbox right around 8 a.m. Eastern Sunday morning. So if you want to do that, you can go sign up for that. Okay, that's it from here. Jen says no trolling here. No, we love everybody in the comment section. I think it's all in good fun. So keep it up. That's it for this week, guys. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday morning. Until then, bye, everybody.
Aloha.